Okay, thank you everybody for joining us today. My name is Holden Sparacino. I manage the Stream Continuity Program within the Department of Fish and Games Division of Ecological Restoration. Today I'm going to be in the background running some tech support and answering questions that come into the chat. I'll be largely handing it off to Amber for the presentation today. Amber, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey folks, I'm Amber. I'm the Ecological Restoration Grant Manager with DER's Stream Continuity Program. And we also have Eli with us.
Hi, folks. I'm Eli Veluti Fry. I'm the Culvert Replacement Technical Assistance Specialist with CRMA, and I will also just be in the background running tech support.
Sienna, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Saina Mashmasarmi, and I am the Environmental Justice Liaison within the Office of Environmental Justice and Equity at EEA. Thank you.
Great, and Carrie, if you want to introduce yourself.
I'm Carrie Banks. I'm with the Division of Ecological Restoration. I oversee our Culvert program that we'll be here talking about today and a couple of other programs within the division.
And Callie, for completeness, if you want to introduce yourself too.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Callie Willett. I'm the Operations Management Analyst with DER, and I will be helping with tech support as well. Welcome.
Great. And Callie, I just got a message from Kara. If you can take a look at that. So everyone, we're here today to learn about DER's Culvert Replacement Municipal Assistance Grant and Training Sites initiatives. I just want to highlight this picture is a site in Windsor that was recently finished construction last fall. This was a project that was funded through CRMA, so it's always nice to see these projects get successfully completed. It often takes a lot to get it to that point, but this one was finished just in the fall. So just real quick, some technical notes. As I mentioned, today's meeting is being recorded. There are also call-in options available. So if you are having trouble calling in with your computer, you can also call in with a phone. And you can see in the calendar details and registration details instructions for joining by phone. Captions are also available if you go to the More button at the bottom of your screen and then click Captions. And we will have a Q&A portion of the presentation at the end of the call. Written questions and answers are preferred, but we will also have the option for people to ask questions live, especially if people are calling in by phone. And from a phone, if you're using the app, you can tap the More button to enter the Q&A, or if you're calling in directly over audio, you can press *9 in order to raise your hand at the end of the call. And as I mentioned, we'll leave some time at the end specifically for questions. The request for response and application are expected to be released later this month, so January later this month. And due to state procurement law, we are not here to give feedback on any specific project details. We're more reviewing the grant opportunity and the upcoming materials and grant specifications. So just a note on that.
Hey, Holden, one
Yep.
thing, if anyone has any questions specific to our walkthrough of the Mass and Bio Screen tool, can those please be submitted via the chat function? So Sienna can keep a record of those and it's a little bit more efficient for her to answer. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Alyssa.
Thanks, Holden. We'd also like to summarize our presentation. We're starting with a quick welcome, and then we'll do an overview of the Stream Continuity Program and the Mass Stream Crossing Standards. Next, we'll give an overview of CRMA and the training site initiatives, including changes from previous years, eligibility criteria, evaluation criteria, and their timeline, and then finally with the Q&A period.
So really quickly, just an overview. The Division of Ecological Restoration, or DER, works with community-based partners to restore aquatic ecosystems throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. DER supports a variety of restoration initiatives, including dam removals, culvert replacements, and the restoration of streams, floodplains, wetlands, and cranberry bogs in the Commonwealth. The stream continuity program specifically within DER has staff that are dedicated to providing technical assistance, funding, and resources to communities in order to remove barriers to fish and wildlife movement, especially culverts and bridges, in order to reconnect upstream and downstream habitats and restore stream processes. Next, Amber's going to talk a little bit about the Massachusetts Stream Crossing Standards.
So the Mass Stream Crossing Standards were developed in 2005 as guidelines on how to properly build a road stream crossing to accommodate for fish passage and river processes. If you look at the photo, the crossing spans the stream and its banks. It provides a natural substrate with a comparable depth and velocity upstream and downstream of the crossing. During high and low flows, the crossing should maintain a natural stream channel that keeps the road open and accessible with very little maintenance. All applicants should become familiar with the stream crossing standards, and a link to those standards is provided on the Eco One Stop website. There are several benefits for structures that meet the stream crossing standards. So traditionally, culverts were often only designed to carry water under the road and were based on limited design. Streams not only move water, but they also move sediment, wood, and debris. As you can see from the photo on the left, traditional culverts can block the movement of fish and wildlife, restrict hydraulic capacity, which can lead to clogging of the culvert and lead to downstream scour and erosion of the structural components, which makes the culvert susceptible to failure and damages. Structures that meet the stream crossing standards have many benefits, including reconnecting access to critical habitat for fish and wildlife, allowing the natural stream channel to adjust movement and sediment of wood. So instead of getting clogged, they can just pass through that system. They improve flood resiliency by reducing the probability of flood-related damages, maintain roads and vehicle access, and result in structures with longer lifespans. An appropriately designed crossing can provide connectivity or connection for animals and organisms that spend time in water, land, or within the stream bed, as we see on the photo on the right. Next, Holden is going to give some background on the stream continuity program.
Thanks, Amber. So many of the 25,000 culverts and small bridges crossing our streams in Massachusetts are municipally owned and managed, and a lot of these structures are aged and are acting as barriers to fish and wildlife. So in order to restore and reconnect our streams in Massachusetts, we recognize we need to work with towns and cities to replace road stream crossings with structures that better meet the Massachusetts stream crossing standards. So in order to do this, the Stream Continuity Program acts in a few ways. The first is to encourage the assessment of road stream crossings in order to prioritize and identify future projects for implementation. We maintain a network of culvert replacement training sites with towns across the state where we not only fund the implementation of sites, but also provide training opportunities for local road managers. We also develop tools and resources, for example, sample bid requests and scopes of work, as well as recommended qualifications for consultant firms and other tools that are on our website. And also, the Stream Continuity Program offers technical assistance in order for municipalities to identify, plan, and implement successful projects. We also provide direct funding through our grant programs, which Amber will talk about.
So we have the Culvert Replacement Municipal Assistance Grant Program, which is also called the CRMA, which administers seed funding for culvert replacement projects and is offered annually now through Eco One Stop. The purpose of this funding is to encourage municipalities and other government units to replace culverts so that stream crossings meet improved structural and environmental design standards and flood resiliency criteria. Massachusetts municipalities and other government units interested in replacing undersized, perched, or degraded culverts with structures that meet the stream crossing standards, particularly in areas of high ecological value, are encouraged to apply. It's a competitive grant initiative and has limited grant funding. The other opportunity that we have is the training initiative that has very similar goals to the CRMA program that I just spoke about. The idea of this program is to have multiple long-term training sites located throughout Massachusetts. At these sites, DER works closely with municipal staff and their consultant to complete a culvert replacement project during multiple project phases over multiple fiscal years. So the main difference would be this program would be more likely to fund from the start to the finish of a project, where CRMA is really funding moments of a project throughout its life cycle. An important part of the training site project is that DER coordinates with municipalities to hold trainings for nearby municipal staff to build capacity for replacing culverts meeting the Massachusetts stream crossing standards. The fiscal year 27 Eco One Stop grant application will include a few optional questions for current training sites to seek funding, but no new training site locations will be considered for fiscal year 27. The images on the slides show before and after photos at one of our completed training site projects in Ashfield, Massachusetts. This map shows the approximate locations of culvert replacement municipal assistance grants and other projects awarded by DER between fiscal years 2018 to fiscal year 2026. A copy of this map is available on our website. As you can see, grants have been awarded throughout the Commonwealth. And then this is just a general overview of the fiscal year 27 Eco One Stop grant timeline for your reference, which includes both CRMA and the training site initiative. So we are expecting the formal application period to open in January 2026. The grant application deadline is expected to be in March 2026. Grant awards are anticipated to be announced during the summer of 2026. And the contract duration will be through June 30th, 2027 for DER programs specifically, so for CRMA and the Training Site Initiative. And next, we'll go through some information about what's new for this fiscal year.
Thanks, Amber. So there's a few different things that are new for us this year. The first is that we are participating as part of Eco One Stop, the common application that I'm sure you've all heard about. But Callie, you can drop a link to the chat to the main Eco One Stop's website. This is a common application where your application can be considered by multiple grant programs. There are some upcoming webinars to learn more about this opportunity in particular, as well as a few from the other grant programs that are participating. And Callie, if you can also share that link to the upcoming webinars that people can take a look at. This year, there is a 10% match requirement. This is uniform across Eco One Stop grant programs. However, designated rural and small towns, as well as tribal governments, are exempt from this requirement. Scoring between sections has been adjusted slightly this year with some higher prioritization on environmental impacts. We have also integrated the Climate Resilience Design Standards tool into the application process. This tool provides some preliminary climate change hazard exposure and risk rating to projects, and the Mass Enviro Screen tool, which Sienna will talk a little bit more about as far as our new screening tool. So an overview of the request for response, or upcoming request for response, I should say. DER is seeking applications to remove or replace undersized, perched, or degraded culverts or bridges located in areas of high ecological value. Projects should be designed to improve river functions, facilitate fish and wildlife passage, and reconnect upstream and downstream habitats. The purpose of this funding is to encourage applicants to replace aging culverts and small bridges with better designed crossings that meet improved structural and environmental design standards and flood resiliency criteria, namely the Massachusetts Stream Crossing Standards. Eligible applicants are the Commonwealth of Massachusetts local government units, including municipalities, towns, cities, districts, commissions, regional governments, and tribal governments. Applicants are also eligible to apply jointly, and should submit one application together with an eligible applicant serving as the lead applicant in that case. Applicants awarded through the funding through the Stream Continuity Program in previous fiscal years are also eligible to apply for either a new project or apply for a new phase of work for an existing project. And excuse me, as noted on previous slides, the primary goal of these projects is to restore fish and wildlife passage and reconnect stream habitats. But there are some co-benefits that will also be considered, such as flood resiliency benefits and public safety benefits. Applicants can group applications for multiple sites, so up to 3 culverts or small bridge replacements or removals within the same local connected stream network per application can be proposed in order to address multiple crossings, or if there are cost savings to address multiple crossings at once. Only projects that intend to meet the goals of the Massachusetts stream crossing standards will be considered. So that means that in-kind replacements or designs that do not consider stream processes like slip lining or aquatic connectivity are not eligible under this grant opportunity. And only one application for any given stream crossing will be considered as well. Proposed structures, proposed projects and structures must be located on a public way, owned and maintained by an eligible applicant, and also cross a freshwater, non-tidal river or stream channel. The stream can be either intermittent or perennial, and projects where a culvert will be completely removed and the road will be decommissioned those projects are also eligible for this funding. And now Amber is going to give a few examples just on the local stream connected network.
So I just wanted to go over a visual of what we mean by multiple structures on the same local connected stream network. So in this example, an applicant could apply for funding for both structures 1 and 2 over Trout Brook, even though they are on different roads. Regardless of how many structures, whether it's 1 through 3, please keep in mind that all work proposed would need to be completed by the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th, 2027. In this example, an applicant could apply to structures 1 and 2, even though there is a road crossing between them over Trout Brook. In this example, the applicant may explain why the middle structure is not being applied for. Some examples would be that they don't own that structure on Route 22A, or perhaps that structure already meets the mass stream crossing standards, so it would not be needed to be improved with our funding. And then in this other example, an applicant can apply for 2 structures on 2 different streams that are within the same local connected stream network. Here, structure 1 is located on Trout Brook and structure 2 is located on a tributary to Trout Brook. So we seek projects where the combined benefits to local stream connectivity and ecology significantly reconnect upstream and downstream habitat. We evaluate projects on the overall ecological benefit. In these examples, all 3 of these examples, the proposed structures are within the same local connected stream network. Proposals which include culverts and bridges scattered geographically or are not hydrologically connected aren't eligible for our funding. In those cases, an applicant could instead choose to submit 1 structure for consideration instead of multiple. Culverts identified with the greatest potential for improving aquatic connectivity and stream ecology via culvert replacement will receive more points under the benefit to the environment evaluation criteria. DER includes tools to evaluate environmental benefits for culvert replacements in the RFR, and Callie can share that as well in the chat. And now we're going to talk a little bit about some eligible project phases. So we do fund any phase of the project from field data collection through the construction phase. However, again, all proposed work must be completed in fiscal year 27. So most years this ends up being about 11 months, as it typically takes at least a month to get contracts executed between DER and the applicant. So please keep that in mind when you submit your application. Typical project phases are field data collection, design engineering, permitting, and construction. This year, requests up to $650,000 will be considered depending on the number of structures, project phases, and work that is proposed. Awards over $300,000 are anticipated for construction projects only. Projects seeking construction should demonstrate the ability to obtain, and secure all their permits and environmental reviews, as well as the balance for any construction funds prior to the start of the grant contract period, which is July 2026. We do anticipate the total available funding to be estimated to $2.9 million in fiscal year 27. Which is subject to legislative appropriation and bond authorization. Applicants may submit a 2-year scope of work and budget for consideration under other ECO one-stop programs. However, DER will only consider tasks and associated costs proposed for completion by June 30th, 2027. Any replacement span greater than 10 feet will be subject to Mass DOT design requirements and review in accordance to Mass General Law, Chapter 85. Please note that this measurement is the channel opening width and not the road width. Consideration should be given to firms with applicable Mass DOT pre-qualification and experience on Chapter 85 review for these projects. We strongly encourage applicants to work with a consultant who is pre-qualified by Mass DOT Architects and Engineers Review Board. More details will be provided in the RFR resources and can be found on the Mass DOT website. As Holden mentioned earlier, there is a 10% match requirement, cash or in kind, for all applications except designated rural and small towns or tribal governments. We do not anticipate being able to provide funding for a full cost of a culvert replacement from field data collection through construction. Applicants are encouraged to report other known sources of funding for the proposed project, including both secured as well as anticipated funding sources. Here are some contract specifications to go over once the grant is awarded. Final contract between DER and the municipality is subject to negotiation for an agreed upon scope of work. That might be because some work was completed from when the application was submitted to when the award is contracted. Copies of all technical deliverables and reports produced under the contract must be sent to DER. Structures will remain the property of the applicable owner. DER reserves the right to fund a portion of a request, modify or amend the scope of work, add or delete tasks, any project proposal in coordination with the applicant to more closely meet the purposes of the program. Applicants will have the option of rejecting the grant award if the revised scope of work does not meet their goals. And then it's worth noting that this is a cost reimbursable grant, so only costs incurred during the contract period for tasks identified in the scope of work are eligible for reimbursement. Applications will be evaluated by Interagency Grant Review Committee. This committee will use the grant evaluation criteria to assess, score, and rank proposals based on the evaluation criteria in the RFR. We encourage applicants to review the evaluation criteria in the RFR, especially since some of the criterion scoring changes from year to year. As Holden mentioned earlier, we did have a slight change that provided more, a higher score towards environmental benefits this year. In general, DER seeks projects that are located in areas of a high ecological value that meet the program priorities. demonstrate municipal and local support, have identified potential pathways for funding, are cost effective and build capacity for leverage resources, and are ready for the proposed phase of work, as well as provide multiple project benefits.
Thanks, Amber. So in addition to the CRMA program, we're also accepting applications for existing training sites this year. So applications for returning training site projects will use a slightly different criteria to assess, score, and rank proposals. So in general, in these cases, DER seeks proposals from existing training sites that continue the ongoing work, meet program priorities, demonstrate municipal and local support, especially for ongoing trainings nearby and for local road managers. And similar to CRMA, we also seek proposals that are cost effective, build capacity, and/or leverage resources, are ready for the proposed scopes of work, and provide multiple project benefits, such as not only environmental benefits, but also public safety, climate resiliency, and socioeconomic benefits for the surrounding community. And Sienna, we'll hand it off to you.
I think it's coming to me first.
Oh, sorry. Kara first.
That's
sorry.
okay. No problem. Thanks, Holden. So hi, I'm Kara Runston. I'm the MVP Program Director for anybody who doesn't know me. If you were on our MVP webinar earlier today, hello again. So I'm also one of the staff leads for the Eco One Stop program. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of context on this change that Sienna is going to also talk about in just a moment when I pass it over to her. But essentially, we are piloting this new mass EnviroScreen tool through the Eco One Stop this year. And we are doing that in partnership with EEA's Office of Environmental Justice and Equity that Sienna represents. And we're thrilled to have her here to talk more about this tool. Just as a little bit of context, when we at EEA created the term priority populations many years ago, it was because we were really lacking a way to discuss all the attributes that could make communities more vulnerable to climate impacts. There were many communities that didn't have environmental justice identified block groups, but did have folks with greater vulnerabilities to the impacts of climate change and pollution for a variety of reasons, for example, health. And so now this gap is actually being addressed through this new tool that is called the Mass EnviroScreen. It's designed to identify areas experiencing overlapping environmental, climate, and social vulnerabilities. For this, for all Eco One Stop grant applications, references to environmental justice populations will be replaced with burdened areas to reflect cumulative place-based conditions. Mass EnviroScreen was initially developed by the Office of Environmental Justice and Equity in response to the 2024 Climate Act, which introduced new requirements to consider cumulative impacts in clean energy and siting permitting decisions. The tool supports these analyses by providing a consistent framework for understanding how multiple stressors intersect in specific places. By applying this same lens within the grant process, Massachusetts aims to better align program design and decision-making with its EJ commitments and ensure that resources and benefits are responsive to communities facing the highest cumulative burdens. So as I mentioned, we'll be piloting it through the grant space in this round of Eco One Stop. And to that end, we really look forward to any feedback you have as you use the tool in your grant applications. I would also note that the decision to pilot it in the grant space was made very recently. So we have not been referencing it yet throughout the expression of interest process that you may have participated in. So you didn't miss anything if you haven't heard about it yet. We're starting to introduce this tool through these webinars, and then we'll also revisit on the Eco One Stop webinars that will happen later in the month. And just again to reiterate that the Mass EnviroScreen will be utilized in the same way that the EJ map was before, to help identify if proposed projects are located in and benefiting burdened and vulnerable communities. So now I'll pass it over to Saina, who can talk more about the tool. Thanks.
Thank you, Kara, for that introduction. And as she mentioned, I will be discussing the Mass Screen and doing a brief walkthrough about how the tool is structured and how the results of the tool can be interpreted. And so the Mass Screen is a statewide environmental screening tool that's been developed by the Office of Environmental Justice and Equity within EEA. It is a GIS mapping tool that is designed to identify communities with the greatest environmental burdens and social vulnerabilities and provide a consistent, transparent baseline that is available to the public. And we hope that the tool can be leveraged by communities to better understand local conditions quantitatively, support advocacy and community organizing, and ultimately strengthen grant applications. Next slide, please. So the Mass Screen uses 30 indicators which look at the intersection between pollution and climate burden and population characteristics, but more granularly, it falls into 5 components or categories of indicators, which include environmental exposure, environmental effects, climate risk, sensitive populations, and socioeconomic factors. The first 3 on the list describe the types of pollution and climate burdens that communities experience, and this includes environmental exposure indicators, which are based on measurements of different types of pollution that people may come into contact with. This includes indicators such as rates of air pollutants like fine particulate matter and ozone. The environmental effects category covers indicators which are based on the locations of toxic chemicals in or near communities that can cause adverse environmental conditions. And this includes indicators like proximity to hazardous waste sites or impaired water bodies. And we also have climate risk indicators, which speaks to a community's level of exposure to climate hazards, such as indicators like flood risk and extreme heat. The last 2 categories on the slide fall under the population characteristics and describe conditions that can make people or communities more vulnerable to those burdens. And they include sensitive population indicators, which measure the prevalence of physiological or health conditions in a community. And sensitive population indicators look at health factors such as rates of pediatric asthma and premature mortality. And then under socioeconomic factor indicators, these are conditions which may increase people's stress or make healthy living difficult and decrease capacity to adapt. And within that category, we look at things such as linguistic isolation and rates of poverty and unemployment. And you'll notice that these components and the indicators are intentionally oriented towards being more community and health focused. And this people-centered approach reflects our environmental justice principles and ensuring that cumulative impacts on communities are considered alongside other types of environmental protection analyses. Next slide, please. And so for each of the 30 indicators, the tool calculates a percentile rank across all census block groups statewide. And then those percentile ranks are averaged within each component category. So we get an average score for environmental exposures, one for environmental effects, and so on before those component scores are grouped into the 2 main categories, which are pollution and climate burden and population characteristics. To generate the final cumulative burden score, we multiplied the burden score by the population characteristic score, and the product is intended to reflect the interaction between these 2 buckets of characteristics. And then once that product or the result is determined, we then calculate the percentile amongst all census block groups in the state, and therefore the final score will indicate how the census block group compares to other census block groups within the state. And so, for example, if a community receives a Mass Screen score of 75 or higher, that means that that particular community experiences cumulative burdens equal to or greater than 75% of all block groups in the state. Next slide. And so the result of this process and model is that on the Mass Screen, higher scores will indicate greater combined environmental and social vulnerability. And to be considered a burdened area, those communities, which are again represented at the census block group level, will be called, it must meet one or both of the following criteria. So a census block group would either have a Mass Screen score at or above the 75 the 75th percentile, or an annual median household income that is 65% or less of the statewide median. And so once you access the tool, burden areas, communities will be highlighted in red, although all census block groups will still receive a mass EnviroScreen score that can be accessed towards the tool. And it is important to note that a community not identified as a burdened area will or may still have elevated percentile values for individual indicators. And in these cases, applicants are encouraged to review the Mass EnviroScreen tool at the indicator level to better understand localized conditions and explain how their project is benefiting those more vulnerable individuals that the tool has identified. Next slide, please. And so on this screen is a screenshot of the application. And as Kara mentioned earlier, the Mass EnviroScreen will essentially replace how the EJ map was originally used in the grant application, but we thought it would be helpful to walk through screenshots of the application as there is more information present on the tool. And so when you enter into the web application, the map will highlight areas designated as burden areas in red. And this is often the first view that people will see. So we started here for orientation purposes. And when you first click into the tool, a text pop-up will appear. It's also on the slide, and it will provide a summary of what Mass EnviroScreen is and how it was developed. But within that overview is a link to the technical documentation, which is labeled as technical documentation. And this document will be an important resource as it explains each of the indicators and details, as well as the data sources and the context behind what you're seeing on the screen. Next slide, please. And so this slide shows a census block group in Pittsfield that has been designated as a burdened area. We've clicked on the census block group so you can view or get an idea of what how the information is presented. And so once you click on a census block group, a full table listing the raw value and percentile for each indicator will appear. For our purposes, I've zoomed in on the socioeconomic indicators within the table to look more closely how the data is presented. And you'll see here for each indicator that there is both a raw value and a percentile. And for the application's percentile, or for the application's purposes, it is the percentile, which is most relevant, as the percentile will tell you how this block group compares to others across Massachusetts. Next slide, please. And on this slide, you'll see a census block group in Provincetown. This census block group has not been designated as a burden area overall, but we selected it to show that there still may be elevated indicators within certain census block groups, even when they are not designated as burdened areas. So when we zoom in to the sensitive populations indicators, again, we see both raw values and percentiles, even though it is the percentiles which is most relevant. But we see here that for premature mortality, the percentile is 80 at the 83rd percentile. We see that cancer crude prevalence is at the 95th, almost 96th percentile. And so we can point to these indicators within the application as being elevated. Next slide, please. And so if there are any questions about how Mass EnviroScreen works, or any issues accessing the technical documentation or interpreting the information within the Mass EnviroScreen, you can reach out to the Office of Environmental Justice and Equity at ej.inquiries@mass.gov. And with that, I'll pass it back to Holden. Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. So a few quick notes before we get to the Q&A. One, just that there are some upcoming webinars to learn about Eco One Stop more generally. Callie previously shared a link to register for these in the chat, but those will be January 27th, 28th, and 29th. So take a look at those. And registration is required for those webinars. And again, just to highlight the timeline, so later in January is when we anticipate the application being released. March would be when we anticipate the applications being due. And just to note, we do need to receive applications before the deadline, and that will be established once the request for a response is released later this month. And the proposed work for the DER portions of the project or the request would need to be completed by June 30th, 2027. Although, as Amber noted, applicants, as part of the Eco One Stop, they may apply for a 2-year grant, but DER would only consider that first year of the project. One note Carrie put in the chat for me is to highlight the fact that we are using a grant management system as part of Eco One Stop. Callie, if you wouldn't mind sharing a link to that resource as well. This is a new application process for us, so please take some time to familiarize yourself with that process, and you will need to register for that. The upcoming webinars will go into more depth about grant management system in particular. And with that, thank you so much for your time. We're going to start the Q&A now. So as I noted, it's preferred if you can write your questions into the chat just so we can have them recorded. But if you're calling in from a phone, you can press *9 in order to raise your hand as well. So we'll go through. I'll just bring those up. Okay. Let's see. So I'm just going to start at the top as in the order they came in. So the first question, thank you for the presentation. If the municipality has funding for a specific project via MVP, could we also get funding through the Stream Continuity Grant Program for the same project? So if you currently have grant funding and that funding is set to expire at the end of this fiscal year, then yes, you would be able to apply for additional phases of work. So for example, if you're completing field data collection or design, you could apply for construction of that same project through this program. The next question I see is from Nate in Yarmouth. Nate says, approximately 100% of our culverts are over tidal waterways. Why are tidal waterways not being considered? So through this grant program, we do have as a primary objective, we are trying to replace these crossings with ones that meet the Massachusetts Stream Crossing Standards. The Massachusetts Stream Crossing Standards are designed specifically for freshwater stream systems. They don't account for things like bidirectional flow or salinity or other impacts, storm surge, that kind of thing, that tidally influenced systems account for. However, there are other programs in the Division of Ecological Restoration that do work in tidal waterways. So I would encourage you to take a look at DER's website. There are some other grant programs that might be better fitted for those types of projects. The next question from Marie, will an application be weaker if it's not within the burdened area of a mass environmental screen tool? We have an EJ area in our municipality where a project is being scoped, but it does not show up as a burdened community. I assume this is because it's not vulnerable to the environmental factors listed on the previous slide. So Anna, if you want to start that one, I can answer from the scoring perspective.
I can jump in quick here.
Sure.
So yeah, for the question, I think, which actually, hold on, I'll need your help here, but for the Culvert program scoring, I believe there's like a certain set of points for projects that are directly in a burdened area or adjacent to within a certain mileage. And then there's also another subset of points for where you can describe how your project is benefiting any vulnerable communities. So even if it is not an identified burdened area, so that, small number of points that would be just for the burdened areas, you would not be eligible for, but the other subset of points you would. Does that make sense?
Yep, that's consistent with what I was going to say.
Great. Sorry.
No, that's great. Yeah.
Override you. But yeah, it's similar to MVP as well. We do the same thing.
Next question is, can you speak to the weighing of CRMA applications, specifically thinking about municipalities that may not be in a burdened area or may have elevated risks, but has a high ecological basis for the grant request? Again, I can speak from the scoring perspective on that. So the RFR will have the final score metrics that will be published. So similar to previous years, the scores will tally up to 100, and you can see the different scoring. I believe in the past, EJ Block Group scoring accounted for about 8% of the scoring, while the environmental factors were much higher. So you'll have to look at the final scoring metrics. Again, we're kind of finalizing that in real time. But that will be available later this month with the release of the RFR. So potentially, if a project does not have an impact to a burdened area but does have a high ecological value, it would still score well, if that answers your question. And I think we have examples of projects that have been in EJ block groups in the past or not that have both successfully been funded. The last question is, where can I find a recording of this webinar, and will the presentation be made available? Kara, you might be best to answer that question, actually.
Yeah, so if DER staff would like to, we will post the webinar recording to the Eco One Stop website that you can then access whenever you would like.
Great. That's all the questions I see in the Q&A, but I'll give another couple minutes if anyone, I don't know if anyone's calling in by phone, or give people a few more minutes to type in questions. Another question just came in. So, are there structures in culverts that are too small to be considered? What constitutes a stream/brook versus a storm ditch? We have an area prone to flooding that is fairly upstream in the network. So, headwater streams, so it would need to be a designated stream system. So, Callie had previously shared a link to tools to assessing environmental benefits for these projects. I believe that also has a resource on identifying stream systems, freshwater stream systems. So I would take a look at that as well. And as far as, headwater streams would definitely be eligible. Stormwater ditches, like side of the road ditches, if it's strictly there for stormwater conveyance, we do not consider that to be a freshwater stream system. Really naturally occurring stream systems are what this grant is focused on. Okay, I am not seeing any more questions. Oh, did a few more just come in? Here we go. Okay. Uh, you had mentioned there was approximately 2.9 million allocated for this funding source. How many projects do you expect to fund? What is the typical funding range per project? Um, so the funding range will definitely vary. I think in the past we've funded projects anywhere from about 30,000 up to our maximum award allocation in previous years. It really depends on the scope of work, the priority of the project, the number of structures proposed, all of that. The list of previous projects that Callie shared that has a list of, it's a map of the project sites as well as the previous press releases, which gives a description for every successful project that we've awarded since FY18. So definitely take a look at that. That will give you a good sense of previous award sizes and the distribution. As far as the number of projects, again, it really depends on the actual awards. I think in any given year in the past, it's been somewhere between 10 to 35 projects, depending on the funding source, the funding amounts, and the size of the projects. But it's quite variable. Could this be used for a herring run rather than a creek? So I don't know if that's talking about a like a hatchery or something, but certainly a herring run on a freshwater stream would be eligible unless the crossing is tidally influenced. I don't know if that's the question. Carrie, I don't know if you understand that question more than I do.
Yeah, I'm not clear on the context of.
But generally, I guess to say freshwater stream systems that are not tidally influenced would be eligible for this grant program. For the new model, is there a 50-50 split between population and enviro factors? I will let Sienna or Kara if you want to answer that question.
Essentially, yes, that the pollution and climate burden will be half of what constitutes the final score, and then the other half will be the population characteristics.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and Kara specified it is tidal, so I think that question is answered. If a culvert on a planned safe routes to school corridor is flagged as a safety hazard, will that factor strengthen a DER culvert replacement grant application? Does DER consider multimodal safety improvements as part of project scoring? So I would say generally, if the roadway failing or the state of the roadway is a safety hazard, or if improving the roadway would improve safety or community access, generally that would be a project that would receive consideration under the co-benefits and community benefits for the projects. So I think generally yes is the short answer. Again, I would encourage you to take a look at the final um, the final scoring metrics that will be published later in this month. Jennifer asks to confirm the 2.9 million is available statewide for both design and construction. Yes, that is correct. 2.9 is the amount that we anticipate being available for this program this year. And I think that's all the questions I see currently, but they have been coming in, so I'll give it a few more minutes. Okay, I am not seeing any more questions, so I think we can end it there. But thank you everyone so much again for your time today and joining us. I would encourage you to take a look at the Eco One Stop website. There will be an official Q&A process as part of the procurement, so that would be another opportunity to ask any questions or to join the other webinars that are planned for later this month. Thank you so much again. I appreciate your time.